but it was still totally a new phenomenon. We didn't really know what it meant. And looking at it 20 years later, the ramifications are huge, and not just in Tennessee, but in several other states as they're marching up the eastern seaboard, basically, and really destroying a lot of the black bass populations there.
This is one time, if you're an Alabama fan, this is one time you don't want to hear Roll Tide.
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, for listening. We got a great show lined up for you today, and we are at the Region 3 office.
Yes, Region 3.
Yeah, excited to be back.
I'm happy to be here too, Jason. It's always fun.
We always have a great time here. We got a great studio here at Region 3 with all the animals you've got here in the lobby, so it's fun.
It is fun. It's a great educational place. Come in and stop by if you're close.
Yeah, stop by. All our regional offices are open. Stop by, say hi, get some information. Our folks love to talk to you, so it's always a good stop.
Yeah, come on in.
Today is all about Alabama bass, which are a nuisance species.
Yeah, yikes, huh?
So you hear bass, you think, well, this is great, bass, but not the Alabama bass. And we're going to learn about it today.
Bass. No, we don't want it.
We're going to learn about it today. Today we have Mike Jolly, regional reservoir biologist here, or manager here in Region 3, and then we got Cole Hardy, A&S coordinator out of the Nashville office, and we're going to chat today. Glad to have you guys.
Good to be
here.
Mike, you recently did a podcast about this, and Mimi approached me, and she's like, we should do one too. I was like, yeah, we should. So go ahead and tout that. What show was that you were on?
That was on the Southern Waters.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was went out nationwide, and it's a good opportunity, and getting the word out and educating the public is a key component, which is why I'm excited to be here today, because this is what we need to be doing, is educating the public about Alabama bass.
Yeah, cool. So if you want to go check that out, go find that on iTunes or podcasting platforms where you listen. Same places you can find this show. I'm sure you can find that one. Mm-hmm. But anyway, well, let's let everybody introduce themselves. You want to start with Cole or Mike? Mimi, what do you think?
I say Cole. I know Mike.
Yeah, this is the first day y'all met, right?
Yes, it is.
Actually,
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Another person on the team. Love it.
Well, my name's Cole Hardy. Like you said, I'm the Aquatic Nuisance Species coordinator, working out of the Nashville office. I've been here for almost 3 years, so just pretty new, but
time flies.
Time does fly. So it's been an interesting couple of years, and I've been enjoying it. I went to school at Tennessee Tech, so I'm not totally new to Tennessee.
A roar went up across the state.
Yep.
They're like, he's all right.
I'm in the right region over here, huh? I work. I don't know if I'm jumping in too quick here, but do a lot of work around the state with our regional fisheries staff. Trying to emphasize, like Mike alluded to, education and outreach, trying to make people aware of nuisance and invasive fish and aquatic organisms. So, also do a lot of work with other agencies and other states across the state. So, yeah.
Well, and Cole you spent some time in Florida, and I said that state has a high number of invasive species, and I'm sure some of that turns into the work that you do here with Tennessee.
It does, and I kind of got my start really in Iowa. I'm from Iowa. One of the first kind of summer gigs I had was as an intern doing ramp site interviews, seeing what people knew about invasive species and making sure they knew to clean, drain, and dry when they left the water and stuff like that. So going down to Florida, invasive species all over down there, unfortunately, but they're definitely a concern. They're something that is impacting our state and states throughout the country, really, and something that we're trying to prevent from spreading as much as we can. So
yeah, and Mike, I know you well, but tell us tell us your name, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know the great work you do in the region, but but don't be humble, share it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the great introduction. And as Jason said, my name's Mike Jolly. Been Region 3 reservoirs really my whole career. This fall will be 29 years in the reservoir system. So what a great place to work. Region 3 has all of the black bass records across the state. So that brings about a lot of attention from a lot of anglers and a lot of expectation. Also a lot of diversity. We have the Cumberland River systems and the Tennessee River systems, and no two reservoirs are alike. And so I've got a great team, and we have a lot of different monitoring systems that we use, from electrofishing to krill surveys, also some ANS work going on within the region as well. So it's a great place, and it's been a great career. Yeah.
I agree. So one of the questions that Jason and I marked down was, what do you enjoy about your work? Because, Cole, I got to say, Aquatic Nuisance Species is kind of depressing.
And it sounds like you've been doing it for a long time.
I mean, sometimes I have to try to keep my chin up. Right now.
But what do you enjoy about working with Aquatic Nuisance Species in the state of Tennessee?
We're really doing a lot to try and make a difference and protect these resources that people care about. And I think that's, when I hear people and talking about carp or something like that, and just aware of the problems that are out there, and pull up to a boat ramp and see people pulling stuff off of their trailer and making sure they're not dragging it to a new place.
Nice.
That can be rewarding, because we know that the messaging and things that we're getting out there is working. I also like, I've met a lot of people doing this, working with a lot of all of our surrounding states and other agencies. So that's been pretty rewarding too, working with just a lot of different people, and even our, especially our own people. I'll throw that out there. We've got a lot of great people across the region, so it's been a awesome experience. So.
Yeah, I'm always so proud of our employees and my coworkers. They're fantastic. Mike, I sing their praises all the time, but it's true, and it's genuine coming from me. I am proud of the great work. Yeah. So, Mike, I know there are a lot of good things that happen in your day, not just the aquatic nuisance species side of it, but what do you enjoy about
I think
the
it's
work?
the opportunity, to look at a resource. I mean, I grew up in Tennessee and grew up fishing, and to learn so much about it through the years, and just to see things evolve and realize that the management of those species are very intricate to the whole ecosystem, and how they, the sustainability. So I always keep a focus on that word in our name of our agency, resources, and manage for that. But it's exciting to see regulations that have been in place for a time that have been successful, positive feedback from the public. Those things are exciting, and they really spur you on, in that positive direction.
That's a good point. I mean, you put regulations in place to work over time, not work tomorrow.
Exactly. Good point.
Yeah. So that's cool that you get to sit back and watch that happen. Over time.
Yeah. Exactly.
People say that back in the day was the heyday, but I know right now there's a lot of fish out there.
Yeah, there is.
It's a lot of fun.
A lot of fish.
Yeah,
and because of some really good work that was done early on by people, a lot of it.
That good scientific piece of it too. I watch the work being done. I watch that science taking place, and it is very exciting, because we're a mission-based agency and a science-driven agency, and we want those two to melt together. And there they are out there doing it. So
it's exciting.
It is. I know what my favorite part of your job is. No, I'm kidding.
We should ask that. Yeah.
Well, do you want to start with how ANS spreads, I guess, and then we'll get into the Alabama bass and how it's gotten here and that kind of thing. So, how does aquatic nuisance species spread across the state?
Yeah, I'll talk just a little bit of generalization here about aquatic nuisance species. So, unfortunately, some of the most frequent ways they're spread are by people. We see. If it's fish, it might be that people think they're doing the right thing for their favorite water body or something like that by putting a fish in the live well and taking it from one place to another. And they think they're going to stock and help, when in reality they might be moving a species that we don't want there, that's going to take over, it's going to introduce diseases or alter genetics to an existing population, and so that's a common way. even unintentionally with by not properly cleaning boats and equipment. So we, like I said earlier, we like to tell people make sure you clean, drain, and dry your equipment between trips. So
And you see that variation of aquatic nuisance species across the state of Tennessee. Do you see kind of regional issues?
there absolutely are. Yep. So I guess just to highlight a couple of them here real quick. Over in western Tennessee, we see invasive carp as a really primary issue and a focus for the agency right now. Move over here into Region 3, Alabama bass are certainly a priority for us, as well as in Region 4. In Region 4 into the mountains a little bit, you get some other issues with certain crayfish that are out there and things like diddy moe in some of the streams. So, again, I'm gonna repeat it over and over. Clean, drain, and dry. Make sure if that you're pulling the boat out of the water, that you're pulling plugs on the boat, letting the water drain out, because there can be microscopic organisms in there. Zebra mussel veligers are a common one, where if you move that water from one place to the next, you might introduce zebra mussels. Make sure you're pulling, weeds and stuff off your trailer and washing any mud and organic material off of your boat or off of your boots if you're wading somewhere in a stream. It's all important stuff.
And I know we do have some for wading anglers. With our trout streams, we do have some cleaning stations even, and it can be passed on gear. So we would really want to encourage people. I'll repeat it with you.
Yep. That's we try to provide the tools where possible. It can be difficult here in Tennessee. We've got so many access points and so many boat ramps and that it's not always feasible to think that there's going to be a station everywhere you go. But some of those real priority locations, we definitely try to make sure that some of that equipment is available. So.
And then, you talk about the wash stations and the efforts. Those educational components. That's what we love to do. We like to educate. That's why we're here today and trying to get that information out. That's what all our employees are doing. Whether it's the biologist or the communicator, we're trying to get that message out there and talk about that. So that's why we're here today.
Absolutely, and our regional staff are also really good at. They've kind of incorporated what we've called ANS Watch into the sampling. So they're out there on their resources regularly. They're, when they're doing their standard sampling or they're monitoring, they're watching for invasive species as well. So that we can
become part of that biological data. Then
we can monitor and hopefully catch something early if something is introduced and maybe be able to do something about it, because these things can be very difficult to reverse once they've been almost impossible in most situations to reverse once they've been introduced.
Yeah, that's scary.
Well, the reason we're here today, Alabama bass, let's get some background on them, their native range, and then start into, how'd they get here, why we don't want them, that kind of thing.
It's kind of a long but still short story, really. It's a short history in Tennessee. They're native to the Mobile River Basin, so it incorporates the majority of Alabama, also portions of Georgia, and a tiny bit in Tennessee in the southeastern portion called the Conasauga River.
Okay.
But they're not native to any Tennessee reservoir or small lake or whatever. So the first place that they were observed from TWRA personnel, and probably anybody, was in 2001 at Parks when we collected 2 fish in our spring black bass electrofishing survey. And we knew they were spotted bass looking, and we knew that we had not previously collected spotted bass in Parksville. So as genetic tests allowed, through advancements in technology, we determined that they were pure Alabama bass. But it was still totally a new phenomenon. We didn't really know what it meant. And looking at it 20 years later, the ramifications are huge, and not just in Tennessee, but in several other states as they're marching up the eastern seaboard, basically, and really destroying a lot of the black bass populations there.
This is one time, if you're an Alabama fan, this is one time you don't want to hear Roll Tide.
Well, and that's pretty good. I didn't think about this, but it's affecting not just Tennessee. It's moving and affecting a lot.
Much broader.
More states,
Actually, Cole and I both have been participants in a local or a recent scientific paper outlining the destruction that they've done, and seeing it in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and other places, and totally disrupting some native populations there is really eye-opening. And their march hasn't stopped. You know, it continues northward.
So Parksville here in Tennessee, but where else?
So we have conducted other genetic tests, and so we know in the Tennessee River, and I'll speak for Region 3, that they've shown up in a big way there. And Watts Bar is on our radar because it had been rumored that there had been some stock there, of course illegally. It's illegal to stock fish into any public waters in Tennessee. In midsection of the reservoir called Whites Creek, and several years ago as we were collecting fish there, it looked like that's what was showing up in our surveys, and we've genetically tested those now, and we know that their presence is there. And in our most recent surveys this spring, we've seen that their distribution within that reservoir has expanded, and also a lot more hybridization going on. And I can talk more about that, but that's one of the greatest consequences that they pose to some of our fisheries.
Yeah, that word hybridization. Let's come back to that.
Sure.
But let's turn to how do they compare to black bass then? I mean, what's the big deal?
That's the hardest concept to get portrayed to a fisherman, and I often say it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, because when a fisherman sees it, and they look really similar to our spotted bass. They were only pulled out of the spotted bass basically lineage there and put into their own species in 2008, so they look that much alike. They're really hard to identify between the two. But when they get into these systems, they can displace the largemouth bass populations that are there, and they can hybridize with our native smallmouth and spotted bass, and really can destroy that population over time. And even before that, the integrity of those species that we have really come to depend on in our state, especially our smallmouth bass, are jeopardized.
So that hybridization, talk
Yes.
about that then.
So the overlap between the Alabama bass and the spotted bass obviously are very similar in their habitat preference, in their prey selection, and also their spawning preferences, even the water temperatures. So it's going to put them in the same place at the same time, in a reservoir system, river system, whatever. Smallmouth bass, too, they have an overlap with their spawning. They start a little bit before the spotted bass and the Alabama bass, but there's still an overlap there. So there's a great opportunity for hybridization in the nesting between the species. And I've actually observed this as we're out electrofishing, and we see smallmouth and Alabama bass nesting together.
Wow.
So that's going to create that hybrid, which is an inferior product for sure. And over time, with the repetition of that, all of a sudden you don't have that pure smallmouth strain anymore.
Wow.
And not to talk about how they outcompete. So through research, it's been determined that a lot of times that an invasive species is put into a new system, they really outcompete those native species there, and that's exactly what they're doing. But they're doing it in a very quick way. Some reservoirs, like Lake Norman in North Carolina, they have, which is comparable to the size of some of our large reservoirs on the Tennessee River. In 10 years, they've totally displaced the largemouth bass there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it doesn't take a whole lot to start either. I mean, it can be just a handful of fish and, introduced into the wrong spot, and you're in trouble.
So there's a big impact, not just for anglers that are out there going after nice largemouth, but there's an economic impact and
huge.
Implications.
I think, Mimi, that's probably the biggest attention getter for me. Let's say Del Hollow, which is the crown jewel for Tennessee for smallmouth bass. It's had the world record since 1955.
World record.
Yes, and so we know through our creel surveys that people are coming from all across the state and all across the nation to fish Del Hollow for smallmouth bass.
Yeah.
If Alabama bass get in there, and like Cole said, it wouldn't take a lot. We could see the demise of that population. There's some estimates in way less than 20 years that it could really compromise that whole system. And the economic effect would be in the millions of dollars for marina owners, all kind of boating, anything tied into that boating and recreation.
I hope bass fishermen are watching this, because you think about having another type of bass in the water. Oh, this is great, or why not? Why isn't this okay?
Yeah.
It's awesome fish to catch and all this stuff, but just these little things that you've mentioned, which aren't little, but these things that you've mentioned just proves that listen to what we're saying, or follow up on the research and do your part.
And feel the depth of that impact.
Yeah.
For me, and I've been with you so many times out on the water, the care that's going into it, it's not taken lightly. The depth of that impact.
Several scientists and fisheries biologists have said that this is probably the greatest threat to the black bass fisheries since the early 1800s when they were recognized as a fish.
Wow.
It's that big.
Wow. Wow. No pressure.
That's impactful, huh?
Well, I don't know if we've touched on it yet, but you've mentioned how similar they look. Mm-hmm. So can you describe the differences, and so people listening can know that?
They're not easy, are they, Cole? No. We've got some pictures on our website, and it shows the illustrations there, photographs of the two different species. Actually shows all of our black bass, but if you had a spotted bass and a Alabama bass and you were looking at them, to an untrained eye, it would really be hard to tell that you had two different fish. For us that have looked at a lot of them, and we know those in Parksville are pure Alabamas because of our genetic test, we've had some visual training there. Mm-hmm. There's a few slight differences, but not anything you would want to bet on every time. They have some more patching above the lateral line and up. But as the spotted bass and Alabama bass, they both have the tooth patch. Their dorsal fin arrangement is the same. Alabama bass, a lot of time around the tail, called the peduncle area, it's more elongated, but they're very similar. And that's a real problem with, trying to get fishermen educated on this, is like it's not identifiable. And a lot of the professionals have trouble as well. So that's why we lean on genetic tests a lot to determine what we really have out there.
So what if someone's on Parksville, say, or somewhere, and they think they have one?
Mm-hmm. In Parksville, I would say pretty much 100% it is.
Okay.
Because there was a very small residual amount of smallmouth there when they were put in. It was basically dominated by largemouth bass, which now Alabama bass for the last several years have been the dominant species there. They displaced it in about 8 years. So now if they get it, now if they're on the Tennessee River, it's going to be tough. Would basically treat it like a spotted bass.
Right. We really don't have a great way to be able to distinguish even by a picture or visual characteristics that a fish would be an Alabama bass versus a spotted bass. So. We're looking at doing some more work here across the state to get a better handle on some baseline genetic information for our bass populations, and that should help us have a better idea where we might have Alabama bass influence already. But this, I think, ultimately goes back to that point that Mike emphasized. It's illegal to stock fish into public waters, and so. Don't go moving these fish around, and you won't be spreading the problem.
That's right.
So great advice. And just to come back to it, we get a lot of photos sent to us, but that's not going to be helpful in this case.
Not really.
It's going to be that biological data that you all are out there conducting.
Yes.
So walk us through what that year looks like, or what that cycle looks like for that biological data collection.
That's really evolving in itself. So recently on several of our reservoirs on our Cumberland River system, we went out and captured spotted bass in those reservoirs. Center Hill has been well known for its spotted bass population through the years and used to have the state record. And we got baseline data from those, and those still showed up to be our native spotted bass fish. In our Tennessee River system, it's just kind of following the amount of that genetic influence from Alabama bass into those systems, the amount of hybrids we have. So when we're out collecting fish, this year on Watts Bar, the crew was out collecting in a targeted smallmouth bass survey. So we took fin clips, we'll send those off, and anything that looked like a spotted bass, and we'll be able to see in those smallmouth, are they still truly pure? Is that degrading over time? And the amount of hybrids we have, or pure Alabamas / spotted bass in that. So, and the manager took pictures of each one of those so we can go back and tie it to that genetic ID, which will be a really neat thing to have.
And it's not one of the questions we planned, but are you seeing concern from marinas? Are you seeing concern from some of those professional angling groups?
I think it's early on, and Cole Mike can speak to what he sees across the state, but we're still having a challenge getting anglers to accept that they're a bad thing, especially on a reservoir like Parksville, which historically had really poor fishing, and now since they've been introduced, they've provided a fishery for a lot of folks, and they're excited about that. The ramifications, though, that they can cause, I think the greatest message we can get out today, and maybe getting ahead of you, but is to prevent from getting into a Dell Hollow or a Center Hill, which would be catastrophic. So they don't have to worry about the ID. They just need to know, don't take them there because there's no lock system on the dam, so they can't get there naturally. They're going to have to be carried there. So if we can prevent that, it'd be great.
Well, and then I think, too, and we're going to run out of time if we don't jump to it, but we stock Florida bass. What's the difference? I mean, why can we have Florida and not Alabama?
That's a good question.
And then we've touched on a lot of this, but just to hit that home real quick.
So with largemouth bass, basically two subspecies. You have the northern and the Florida, which make that up, which means they're very similar. I would start by saying that any fish that TWRA stocks, there's a lot of biological assessment that goes into that.
Tons, yeah.
Look at the risk, the introduction, public acceptance, of course, our own goals and objectives. And it was that way with the Florida bass. So they were put into Chickamauga, and they've hybridized with the northern strain there. The other thing I would say about it, in the 1980s, there was a survey done across the state of Tennessee on largemouth bass populations in reservoirs. And almost all of those fish, all those systems showed up with a Florida influence. Another neat thing, too, is the range of the Florida bass and the northern bass overlap close to where like Chickamauga is, Tennessee, which is called an intergrade zone. So you could have an overlap there, which means it's more natural for both of those to coexist. And there's no documentation that we have in the state or anywhere else of like Florida bass being invasive, to other black bass. They're really homogeneous, in there with a northern strain.
Yeah, one thing that you've taught me through the years is that that's an enclosed ecosystem. It's not like a bird that might make it a long distance. It really is going to be human impact at this point.
Yeah. Exactly.
So just to touch base on that, what's the best defense against it?
Education and prevention.
Clean, drain, and dry, and don't move fish.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
I like that. Clean, drain, dry. Don't move fish. Don't stock fish in other waters.
Exactly.
It's illegal. We've said
Exactly.
that. But yeah, this is great information. I've learned a lot today. I know now why we don't want Alabama bass. Thank you. I appreciate you guys taking time out.
Shoot, thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Yeah. Mimi,
Yeah.
thanks for pulling this together.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
There's more like this on our website. Go to tnwildlife.org. Check out those pictures. We'll direct a link there so you can check that out as well. If you're watching the show, go down there in the comments and find the link. But get out there and educate yourself. And,
Absolutely.
And have fun on Tennessee waters.
That's
Go
it.
out there and fish. Have fun.
That's the big thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is Tennessee WildCast. We appreciate you guys. If you want to find this show, it's on Facebook, it's Instagram, it's on YouTube. You can follow us on your favorite podcasting platform, listen to us, and then we're on 23 radio stations across the state. So get out there and find it, watch us, listen to us, and keep coming back. And we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee WildCast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.